I recognize St. Peter.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Prime Minister for bringing this bill, and as he just rightfully said, that we must adhere to the international best practices and standards in order not to be blacklisted. Because I know what we went through in the Stanford era, when Stanford was even placed, Mr. Speaker, as chairman of the Financial Services Commission, and he was in the business, so he was regulator and regulating his own business. And the United States and United Kingdom did not take great pleasure and came down on Antigua and Barbuda, blacklisted us, issued financial warnings against Antigua, and severe sanctions against the country. And the Prime Minister is doing the right thing, of course, to make sure that we're keeping international best practices and adhering to all of the Financial Action Task Force, the OECD, the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, and all of those recommendations, Mr. Speaker. And I'm surely not here, Mr. Speaker, not as the opposition. I'm not part of the opposition, Mr. Speaker. But I'm a member of Parliament, and I am part of this government still. At least I hope so. Part of the Antigua Labour Party, and always will be, hopefully, and I must give my constructive criticism, Mr. Prime Minister. After, of course, consulting with local legal luminaries in this country, I send the legislation to them and I get feedback from here and from other territories. So I have a few comments, Mr. Prime Minister. It's not that I don't support the bill. I support the bill wholeheartedly. We have to adhere to all of these best practices, and we have to. If you don't, as we said earlier, Might is right, they blacklist you. They will make your job more difficult as the chairman of the subcommittee of CARICOM with your correspondent banking relations, and we will get nowhere with that. If you can't send money out of Antigua, if you can't wire transfer monies, you can't import no goods. They cripple all your economies in these Caribbean islands. So it's not if, but, or maybe. We have to pass these types of legislation, and we have to come to the House from time to time, over and over, with their recommendations and do it. I accept that, sir. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, and through you, and Mr. Prime Minister, I remember growing up as a young teenager and listening to Mr. Hugh Marshall Sr. He have a very big mouth, and we all know that, but he speaks a lot of sense. And I remember he always said, right at my home, in front of Sir Lester, and he said, I remember one time, to Cosmas Phillips, the late Cosmas Phillips, QC. And after that, he have many times said to Keith Ford, both of them who served as Attorney Generals in Severe Birds, both QCs, both Attorney Generals. Sir Robin would recall this. He was there back in the 70s and 80s. Do not pass legislation in government that you cannot live with in opposition. Now, I know the Labour Party is going to be in power for the next 20 years, especially with these jokers over there. But at the same time, Mr. Prime Minister, we must pass legislation that we can live. There's certain little important, very important, and I know you said let's do it in committee stage, but I need you to know, because sometimes in committee stage I don't even get a chance to speak, Mr. Speaker. The AG don't listen to me a lot of times, my dear friend. So let me go quickly. First of all, Mr. Speaker, this is my friend at heart. The love is real. Mr. Speaker, this is the umpteenth amendment to the Money Laundering Prevention Act, and I know that. It has become unwieldy, and the reason for this bill seems to legislate, of course, the recommendations of the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, I take it, and the Mutual Evaluation Report in Antigua and Barbuda from 2018. But, Mr. AG, we as lawmakers in this House, at least give us the respect and the courtesy to have sight of this report and also to update of the FATF 40 recommendations. I understand from your explanatory memorandum, which I read here, that there are 40 recommendations that the Financial Action Task Force made in 2012. You reference it in your explanatory memorandum. Share it with us, Mr. AG. I'm not picking on you, sir. I'm just saying get your legal people in their office to do their work. We should not be asked to rely, Mr. Speaker, and you are a legal luminary of many years, to rely on quotations from the report. We should have the full report. This bill, Mr. Speaker, contains 33 pages, 33, and 27 clauses of amendments. Mr. Speaker, you know the drafting of legislation, how it's supposed to be done. You cannot, it is impossible, Mr. Speaker, to follow the current law, Mr. AG, unless there's a consolidation of all of the amendments. Listen, when you want to go to a piece of legislation, not just money laundering, and we're making all of these amendments. When was the last time that the government of Antigua and Barbuda paid for and commissioned all of those laws of Antigua and Barbuda to be put in those books there before the mace? But Mr. AG, you are modern Attorney General. You're aggressive. Get with that. Come on, Mr. AG. That's not a lot of money. Get it done. How can we follow? How, not just us. Forget about us in here. How can any lawyer outside of Antigua send me your Money Laundering Prevention Act, send me your ONDCP Act, and they have to go back to the 80s or 90s, then every single amendment, I'm sure we've made nearly 80 or 90 amendments. We need all of the consolidation of these textual amendments into the law. So I'm just here, Mr. Speaker, suggesting to my legal friend, my dear friend, the Honorable AG, to have his legislative drafting department to consolidate all the amendments, including this one, to the Money Laundering Prevention Act, and make it available to the lawmakers and to the public as soon as possible. And not just this one, but all of the other amendments, like the Labor Code. There are many other amendments that we pass here. We must first of all, as lawmakers, when you circulate the bills, Mr. AG, get your legal department to send us the original bill. How can we follow these amendments? I asked my good comrade here today to look at something with the digital asset bill. He can't follow it. We don't have the original bill. So we are asked to look at amendments, and we don't. You would have been doing a great service, and I beseech you, Lord Stedroy of the beautiful constituency of St. John's City South. Please do that for the country. You'd do a great service. But that is the theatrics that the PM will say I should go and work in Hollywood. Let us go now to the bill, Mr. Speaker. You know, I'm healthy. He said he lost weight, but let me tell you something, AG. I have a personal trainer every day, and I've lost 14 pounds, and see my suits can fit me now, and they're big. And I'm living healthy. Got a nice treadmill. The PM didn't want to invest the money on the treadmill. He said he's broke. He's buying food for the country, which I commend you, sir. But there's one provision that I wish to highlight with all seriousness, Mr. AG. Well, not one, but it's an important one. And if we look at the bill, it's the insertion of sections 20G to 20N. Let us look at page 33. Explanatory memorandum introduces the unexplained wealth order, which is a form of civil confiscation order used where a person suspected, let me find page 33. A person is suspected of engaging in money laundering activity is unable to explain the source of his wealth, end of quote. I just stated right here in the explanatory memorandum. And that, I continue, I quote from the section here, this is based on precedents from the United Kingdom since 2017, Australia since 1990, and Trinidad and Tobago, end of quote. That's what the explanatory memorandum says. And I would like to ask the Honorable AG to you to tell us what legal challenges have there been to these unexplained wealth orders in the United Kingdom, in Australia, and in Trinidad and Tobago? Well, exactly. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not, AG. You know better than that. I can quote the case laws and show them to you. I have some of them here, but I don't want to be too long. I have some of them here from Sir Elliot Motley and from Sir James Guthrie. Anyway, what have the courts of those countries said about these orders, which the government seeks to introduce here in Antigua and Barbuda? We deserve to know what are the safeguards to ensure that this will be an anti-money laundering measure and not a tool for political harassment. Let me tell you, let us not forget Let us not forget the days of UPP when Baldwin Spencer sat in that chair with Prime Minister Gaston and said, I'm going to hound you. I'm going to hound you. And they used legislation against you, the Attorney General, and charge you. Against me. Against the Prime Minister, the then ex-Prime Minister Celesta, for 10 long years. Justin Simon, and the Prime Minister with his land that he bought legitimately out at English Harbour. Got his cabinet approval, got national parks, tied him up in the courts. Do not pass legislation in government that we cannot live with in opposition. So Robin always said so too. It's not just you, Marshall. You got to live with it. Unexplained wealth. Let me tell you something, Mr. AG. Don't get upset with me today. To you, Mr. Speaker, unexplained wealth, that is very broad. I'm in business. I have a business. Gaston Brown was in business long before, sorry, Mr. Prime Minister, Prime Minister Brown, long before he come into Parliament. Started with a car rental, started doing all kind of construction of homes, had all of that. You were in business as a lawyer. You can accumulate money. Sir Robin here was doing accounting and bookkeeping and investing his money. They don't care. You had a baker shop for many years, yes or so. Melford Nicholas, Honorable Melford, was in communications. Different persons, Mr. Landell Benjamin doing his auditing.
Honorable member, apart from the fact that you don't seem to want to have lunch, apart from the fact that we had lunch set for a certain time.
No, I have to speak, sir.
No. What I'm saying is you are wafting into some irrelevance with regard to the bill.
Everything is relevant here.
And inasmuch as we are on a time limit, try to just continue on the bill, please.
I will continue on the bill. But, sir, if you're tired and you want to have lunch, ask the deputy to take your seat. I respect your elderly age, and I have to respect that you're tired, sir. But I will go back to the bill clause by clause. But this is important. I'm not waffling on going off the bill. The bill speaks about wealth. The bill speaks about explaining unexplained wealth. And they can ask the director of ONDCP, whoever he may be 10 years from now, or 20, how did Prime Minister Gaston Brown accumulate this wealth? How did Asot Michael accumulate this wealth? And your explanation they don't have to accept. As much as I can say that I rented a building to government and I have business and I have investment in the stock market and I inherit money, they don't have to accept it, how this bill is drafted. They don't have to accept it. It's a very dangerous piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker. Extremely. We must look at that section of unexplained wealth. Because we're all politicians in here. And it's not just for politicians, eh? It's for members of the society, business people, for Tom Joe. I'm just saying that we know the precedent, not just in Antigua. Governments change in the Caribbean and you have political harassment. They use legislation to not prosecute, but persecute you and hound you. What do you ask me? What's the section that it was on? Right. Because it is noticeable, Mr. Speaker, that an unexplained wealth order is triggered under suspicion. Look at the word, suspicion, that one is engaged in money laundering. Compare now the proceeds of crime legislation that we have. The proceeds of crime legislation that we have is triggered on conviction, not suspicion. You can't come and charge me on suspicion and tell me that I must explain my wealth. You don't accept the explanation on suspicion. No. Try me. Convict me. Say, I find that you have all this money and businesses and cars and wealth and houses and I do accept your explanation. Take me to court. Convict me like the proceeds of crime. That is bad legislation. That is draconian. Them OECD people and white people, they're wicked. And I wonder if they have them kind of legislation in Europe. We want to fight money laundering in this country. Don't get it away. I support the legislation. I support what Colonel Croft is trying to do on his department. They're doing an excellent job. I support the Prime Minister's cabinet that we have to pass legislation like this. But we can't just do willy-nilly. We got to want to unjustly trample on the citizens' rights to property and privacy. So what happened to our Constitution? What happened to the rights of privacy? What happened to the rights of property? You're a lawyer, Queen's Counsel, criminal lawyer. Look at it. This brings me to the point, Mr. Speaker.
St. Peter, look at 22.
Pardon,
Sorry
sir?
to, I'm just
What section, sir?
22, the ex parte, 22.2, an application for wealth declaration may be made ex parte. What do you think of that?
Read 22. An application for an unexplained wealth declaration order may be ex parte. Listen,
You see, I had...
in matters like that, I don't have a problem with that. Because there's certain confidential things that the ONDCP, to be fair to them, you cannot have it inter partes.
I agree.
You agree?
But when is the respondent able to reply and respond to that? Because applying to the court, you apply to different judges. And there are judges who will issue an order, an ex parte order, and say, but you must serve it by such and such a time, and so must be heard. There are other judges that don't bother with that.
I thought once it's ex
Mr.
parte.
Speaker.
And I'm talking about actual things that have happened very recently.
Mr. Speaker,
No, just to stimulate things.
continue reading. Read
What is that?
read the bottom of 17.
They're informed?
No, at the bottom of page 17. Page
20.
the unexplained.
The conditions?
No. The unexplained wealth.
Don't give me the page, give me the clause.
20H3.
28?
20H3.
20H3.
Then turn the page now.
That is serving the order.
No, then turn the page.
That is not, the man is not being heard.
Turn the
Anyway, go ahead, I'm not,
No. Turn the page.
nobody voted for me, so you guys go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, may I assist?
Yeah.
When you turn the page, just to answer your question, that's all I'm saying. When you turn the page, sir, and you look at 20H4, that answers your question. It says, where the court makes an unexplained health declaration order, the respondent may, within 28 days of service, apply to the court for the order to be set aside or discharged.
Oh, okay, all right.
I'm just answering your question, sir. That's all I'm saying. So the procedures are well laid out. Not saying there's not a merit in what he's saying.
When was it, 21 days?
28 days.
28 days.
It says that where the order is made, be made within 28 days of the service, apply to the court for the order to be set aside or discharged, and it continues, sir. Just answer your question.
But you realize why, I didn't see that, but what caught my eye is I've had first-hand knowledge of ex parte orders that are not properly given. And if you say anything, you're a bad fellow. Yeah, go ahead, Father. I'm so
Oh,
sorry,
sorry.
I just...
Excuse me. Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you. This brings me to the point, sir, that enacting these various anti-money laundering provisions or measures is one thing to do. But these implementations can have consequences that we did not necessarily foresee. For example, Mr. Speaker, and the Prime Minister can tell you, that banking in Antigua and Barbuda, and I've heard the Prime Minister say so over and over, and lament on it, it's very restrictive in terms of the commercial development of this country. I mean, let me tell you something, Mr. Speaker, why I say that. It is very difficult in this country to move money through the banks. Extremely. Even our CIP money, sir. When they come through, Mr. Speaker, we have one of the most rigorous, if not the most rigorous regimes in the entire world. It's 4 levels of due diligence that is done. We have our agents, they do their due diligence. We have the JS, what do you call it, Mr. Prime Minister, the JRCCC. All the applications are sent to them. I believe certain applications are also sent to the US Embassy. Plus, we do our own due diligence at the CIP office. We have compliance officers, and we hire private firms in the United States, in Europe, in the Middle East, that we retain. And that's why some of the applicants complain that in Antigua the delay is too long. It takes a month, sometimes 6 weeks, 7 weeks to get their approval, because we want to protect the integrity of the program. Do you know, Mr. Speaker, that the monies come here in escrow by the agents, and vast majority of the times the banks are holding up the monies. They will not release the monies to the agent to pay into the CIP office. I don't know if this issue has been resolved. The Prime Minister can enlighten us. I've not been in government, but I know certainly. I hear the agents up to a year ago complaining, and the CIP and the government needs the revenue. And banks are holding up their payments for sometimes 6 months. And the banks now want to do due diligence that is already done by 4 layers. So after you already do due diligence by 4 layers, the banks now want to do their own due diligence. I mean, it is ludicrous. It is ludicrous. How can, I mean, it's a legitimate business. We're not the only one doing it. The great United States has the EB-5. Canada has their citizenship program. Australia has it. I mean, St. Kitts has the oldest one in the Caribbean. Grenada joined, St. Lucia, Dominica. So why is it so difficult to move money, Mr. Speaker? And, Mr. Speaker, all the requirements to have money put in an account is an overkill. To open up an account, oftentimes a legitimate transaction could be killed. Because sometimes they even send back the funds, sir. It's often said that the hardest thing in Antigua and Barbuda, and I know that the Honorable Member for St. John City East as the Minister of IT is trying his best to digitalize and all of the government offices and the systems and Inland Revenue and APU and so forth, to have, you know, a more smooth transition in the modern economy. But if you can't even bring money, you can't send money, you can't receive money, you can't open an account. As an Antiguan, you're going to open up an account, and then they don't just want, okay, yes, of course, you have to give your 2 pieces of ID, your passport or your driver's license, utility bills, you know, job letter, reference letter. Great. What else they want? They want a hair on your head? Well, I do have none. I do have none. You go to the United States, Miami or New York, you walk in. As an Antiguan or Caribbean citizen, you give them your 2 pieces of government ID, you give them your job letter or your business certificate, and that is it, and a utility bill. That is it. They open the account right there and then in 24 hours. They check you through the computer, they make sure you're not money laundering, they make sure that you're not terrorists, and in 24 hours, maximum 48 hours, Citibank, Bank of America, Chase, and JP Morgan open up your account. What is wrong with our local banks in this country? What is wrong? I may call our chief of staff, Max Hurst, deposits his salary check, and they're asking him for source of wealth. Can you imagine that? Source of wealth for his salary check as the chief of staff of this country? What the speaker said? Man, these banks are ridiculous. Ridiculous. Huh? The leader. Do you know, Mr. Speaker, my good friend is telling me here, as the leaders of this country, because we are politicians and we're deemed peps, we can't open a new bank account. We cannot. We cannot. You only take what, mister? But Mr. Prime Minister, what are you doing about it? At Antigua level, at the OECS, at the Central Bank, at the Monetary Council meeting, what are you doing? These banks can't just dictate, really need it. But I want to say, and I know that you're going out a little upset with me and Mr. Croft, but you're all to be blamed. You're all to be blamed. Because when, you know what the banks tell me? You know what Arlene Edwards and all of the banks tell me at Scotia and ECA? They say, well, it's your government, you're parliamentarians, you all pass all these anti-money laundering legislations, and we have to do this and we have to do that. I say, nonsense. We never tell you that you can't take a check or you know, Mr. Speaker, you cannot withdraw over $10,000 in cash out of the bank to pay my construction workers that are fixing my building without giving them a source of wealth and a source of funds, and you have to pay construction workers your own money. I'm not saying depositing cash, you know, I understand about cash, all over, you can't. And if you see the paperwork, it is ludicrous. It's nonsense. So,
I think
Mr.
we
Speaker,
all have our stories about that.
the level of due diligence and the anti-money laundering guidelines are much too rigid. They're totally insensitive to the fact that banking services are key to commerce in this country. The PM keeps saying so. And the irony of it is that quite the contrary, as I've said, in the United States, where banks facilitate commerce. They don't understand, you know, they're not there as the FBI and the regulatory authority. The ONDCP have their job to do, to regulate them and make sure they're compliant. But the banks now feel, oh, I am the police, I'm the regulatory authority. I am here to do all of the checks and the balances and all of that. Total nonsense. It's nonsense, Mr. Speaker. So I hope that the Prime Minister will engage the banks here and bring them on board to the vision of building an economic powerhouse. And Mr. Speaker, before I finish, I want to deal with two sections. Section 10, if you look at Section 10, in the amendment of money laundering, it creates a regime so that it places on the director of the ONDCP the right to approve a business. And it amounts to a fetter on the right of the person to work or to own property. Look at Section 12D. 12D, Mr.
12D?
12D. Page 9. Registration of unregulated financial institution. You have it? All right. The whole section creates a regime that places on the director of the ONDCP. Pardon me? Okay, but I just wanted to say, you expunge it, but let me make the point. Why you have to expunge it. Because the director of ONDCP cannot approve businesses which is a right to fetter persons, and this point where persons who own business are required to submit to someone for permission to carry on their business on an arbitrary business that was already ruled, Mr. AG and Mr. Speaker. You would recall the Eastern Caribbean Court in the Goodwin case versus the AG of Antigua and Barbuda in 1999. You remember when Minister Malvin Joseph brought in the Registration Business License Act, and you had to go and apply to him, and he had to sign every certificate for every business. Okay? The courts ruled, you will recall St. Philip's North, honorable member, that it was wrong. And we had to do away with the Business Registration Act. Now, in this case now, the grant of permission by the director is arbitrary, as well as there's no criteria upon which is consent. So I'm very happy, Mr. AG, take it out. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, Section 12E. AG, can you now look at Section 12E? This is also a fetter on the financial institutions to conduct of business. Again, Mr. AG, no criteria is given for a fit and proper person. You need to define what is the criteria for a fit and proper person, sir. Okay. All right. To conduct business. By regulations. Okay. Okay. Section 16 now, amendment to section 18. You have that, AG? Section 16, section 18. Directives obtained in a person private and confidential banking business generally, not in the exercise of his functions to prevent crime or detect crime, but generally. And then he can, without restriction, share this information with and any organizations around the world. Look at that section carefully, sir. Yes. Yeah. No. It can't be general. How is standard in terms of sharing the information? Yes, but not general in the exercise of its functions to prevent crime or detect crime, but generally, and then without restriction. I'm just saying the language. Generally and without restriction, he has to get a court order right now. Under the Proceeds of Crime and the Current Money Laundering Prevention Act, he has to go to the court and get an order of the court. So I assume you were going to do the same thing here? Yeah, but this is not limited to inland revenue, sir. This is not limited to inland revenue. This would totally eliminate the courts for an order to obtain an individual's banking information. The AG, you know what I'm speaking about. Recently, the ONDCP in a matter had to go to the court and get an ex parte order to go into someone's bank account. So you don't need that no more, Mr. PM? Mr. AG? That's going to be challenged, you know. Pardon me? You with me? Okay, thank you. Why don't you tell me you with me? Mr. PM, are you familiar with the Goodwin case, sir? The Goodwin case at paragraph 44, and for your benefit. You don't have it there. You have it? Pardon me? Yes, sir. Generally, the amendment to section 18, 19, not the currency reporting going into the bank accounts. I think it's 18. I think I have the clause mixed up. It's either 16 or 18. But there is a clause in there, AG. I think I numbered it wrong. But they do not need to go to the court. Ask Mr. Croft, where is it? For the freeze order, correct. That's for the freeze order. I'm talking about the sharing of information. No, I'm looking for the clause for the PM. Well, he got lost. He's trying to find the correct clause. There's a clause in there, Mr. Croft. There's a clause that you do not have to go to the court and you can share the information. But look at it right here, man. I find it now. Section 16B, page 13. May share the information with any competent authority for the purpose of conducting an investigation. All I'm saying is go to the court, even if it's currency reporting when leaving Antigua and Barbuda. Page 13, 16B. Shouldn't you have to go to the court, AG, to still get a court order, even if it's ex parte? You don't see it?
In the first third of page 13. On the 16, you have 16, A, B.
Mr. AG, what is going on? Are we in committee? What is going on?
It's the exact as the CRS. So you don't need to get a court order. Okay. All right. I yield. Listen, I'm here to support the bill. All I'm saying, anything that is onerous and I think that trample on the rights of the private citizen, we should expunge. But if you say it's already there in the CRS and we are doing it, we have to comply. Correct. Now, section 22. Insertion of section 20G to 29N. Section 22. Pardon me? 22. What page is that? 16. 16 is that? Yeah. Well, I dealt with that already. No, I dealt with that. I dealt with that in terms of the protection of his privacy, and I hope at the committee stage the AG will really look at that. Because, you know, AG, and let me just repeat this, the individual would have committed no offense, or then driving a car or living in a house that the director deems is beyond his means. It's so arbitrary. I mean, you know, if Minister Darrell Matthew get a big house tomorrow and they decide that your house is too big, the AG, they just tell you, oh, okay. I decide how you accumulated all this wealth. And you tell them, well, I worked as a lawyer for 40 years before I came into politics. And he do accept that rationale. It's just too wide. That's all I'm saying, you know. What offense you would have committed? You don't like that you're driving a Mercedes-Benz, maybe. In essence, the director see you driving an expensive car or in an expensive neighborhood. It's not just politicians. I'm just using politicians here as examples. He then applies to the court for an order. So on suspicion, Mr. Speaker, he don't like the nice car you drive in. He just applies to the court for an order to state your income, or more importantly, where you got the car or house from. And if the answer is unsatisfactory, it may be forfeited to the state. No. Maybe I'm misunderstanding something here. I want to really ask the AG this. We're having 5 conversations, so I can't get an answer, Mr. Speaker. Of course it does. In the meantime, serious reputational damage in a small community. So, you know, you take one of our contractors, our local contractors that work in for Mr. Weston, and they don't like the size of his house or the cars that he drives, and I'm not calling no name. But you take one of the contractors, and they just go, Mr. Speaker, on suspicion. I don't know, unless I've read it wrong. I don't want to call a lawyer, some of them you have great respect for. I've looked at this. It's crazy. If the answer is unsatisfactory, all they do is forfeit your land, forfeit your house, and forfeit your car. Mr. PM, what I'm saying, I support the bill. I'm not telling you to withdraw no bill. I support it. I think committee stage, between Colonel Quoff and the AG. Correct. Because, sir, if they don't like a car of a contractor down the road, and on suspicion, the director of ONDCP say, oh, you have 3 cars in front of your house and a big house. Where you get this big house in Williki from on Sweets? All of a sudden. And he say, well, I'm doing contracts with the government, I'm selling this, I'm bringing a used car, whatever business he's doing. And if the answer is unsatisfactory, all he has to do, the director of ONDCP, is forfeit it, sir, to the state. And unsatisfactory would include gifts from politically exposed persons. Do you understand that? Unsatisfactory would also include gifts from politically exposed persons. So I get a watch, I get a gift, I get some statue from the Chinese ambassador, you as Minister of Foreign Affairs, I'm sure every time you travel they give you some thing of coffee and ginseng tea and all them statue and things. You better go and report it, you know, because under the public, the transparency law and the prevention of corruption, you know, every single gift that they bring, officially in your official capacity, we're supposed to report it. Ludicrous. It's craziness. We better amend that as UPP passed that legislation. I wonder if just in time we reported all what he got and Baldwin Spencer.
Sorry?
I'm saying that under the previous legislation that we have to report any gift over X amount. And I wonder all who reported. That's all I'm saying. So that section definitely, that cannot go, Mr. Speaker. And I am, once again, I'm going to repeat, I support the bill. I'm not here to criticize for the sake of criticizing. I understand all what the Prime Minister says. We have to adhere to the best standards, international standards. We'll be blacklisted. We have signed on to all of these treaties. We want to show that we are transparent government. We are accountable government, not just locally to our citizenry, but also to the international community. We cannot afford to be a rogue nation. We cannot afford to be blacklisted or grey-listed, and we want to stand up. And that is why our Prime Minister can stand in any forum and say to them, we have the best legislation, whether it's with CIP, whether it's with anti-money laundering, whether it's with our ONDCP, and we are a proud little black country, good legislation, but at the same time, protect the rights of our citizens, do not trample their rights, do not infringe on their constitutional rights, and don't open yourself up for constitutional challenges, Mr. AG, from anybody. That's all I'm saying. With those few comments, sir, I end my presentation. Thank you very much, sir.